Well, good afternoon, YouTube. This is Chuck, and it's Sunday, April 20th, 2025, a little bit after noon, and I'm out here in the van, and I'm sitting kind of toward the back of the van because the light's a little bit harsh up where I normally sit in the driver's seat, and that's kind of gave my face a washed out look the last video I shot out here. But I've got kind of an interesting story for you this afternoon, and something you might have heard about because it actually hit the national news wires. Well, this is going to be a Bigfoot video, and back on Monday, there was a little boy, a 2-year-old boy, that walked away from his house up near Seligman, Arizona. Well, Seligman is about halfway between Flagstaff and Kingman, along I-40 and along old Route 66. Seligman's kind of the home base of the Route 66 movement, so if you're interested in all that old Route 66 stuff, Seligman is ground zero for that. But anyway, this little boy walked away from his house. And so once they found out he was missing, of course, they called the sheriff and called out search and rescue, and they had a major search effort going on. And it went on all night. Well, the next morning, the little boy showed up at a ranch 7 miles away. And the story goes that the rancher's dog found him. Well, it's it's pretty tough country up there. It's not pine tree country. It's actually what we call pinon juniper country. But it's pretty rugged, and a lot of it is volcanic. And so a lot of it's got sharp rocks, and it's just basically pretty tough country. And it gets pretty cold at night. Especially back a week ago, it was pretty cold then. And so, immediately, whenever I hear stories like this, I'm familiar with the whole David Paulides missing 411 stuff. And so I pay attention to stuff like that. And, and naturally, all's well that ends well. And the little boy seemed to be fine the next morning. But the question remains is, how does a 2-year-old walk all night and show up 7 miles away? That doesn't compute. Now, the search and rescue people, they're pretty sharp, and they have all kinds of psychological studies of 2-year-olds and how far they'll go, and whether they go uphill or downhill, or what they'll go looking for. And so what they do is they start a circular perimeter, and they start working circles around from where the kid was last seen. And that's just the normal way they do things. Well, when this kid showed up, he was well outside the search area, and they'd been out all night. And so the question brings a lot of questions to mind, and of course, once for somebody like me, that a little light comes on in my head, and I start paying attention to stuff like that. Well, the story hit all the Arizona news stations, of course, and it actually hit the national news. It was actually on the national news about how the rancher's dog found this little boy. Well, last evening, I actually got a text message from one of my viewer/friends, a lady in Nevada who's also a medium. And she had heard about this, and she had kind of reached out to me and wanted to know if I'd heard about it before. And I'd had several of viewers have reached out to me with that same question. And so, of course, I've been following this all week. And so I know that she has a pretty good relationship with her local Sasquatch folks, and so I said, why don't you ask them? See if they tell you anything. See if they'd be willing to tell you anything. Well, that was last evening. Well, this morning, last evening right away, she got back with me almost immediately. And she said, yes. She said they told her that what had actually happened is that 3 young Sasquatches had just messing around, and they had lured this little boy away from his home by mimicking his mother or father. Now, according to her, there was 2 young males and a young female, and the young female didn't think it was a good idea to do this. But anyway, they lured the little boy, and when they got him a little ways away from home, they probably weren't sure what they were supposed to do, and they probably knew they were in trouble, so they basically put him under a tree somewhere, and they left him there. Well, the adults, when they found out about it, they went and got the little boy, and they took him probably someplace where they were familiar with, and they left him near this ranch, where the rancher's dog by the name of Buford, by the way, which I think is a cool name for a dog, actually led him back to the ranch house. And this was Tuesday morning by this time. And the rancher, of course, found him and got reunited with his parents from there. So they asked the little boy, where he spent the night, and he said he slept under a tree. Well, still, that meant that little boy from point A to point B was 7 miles, and he's a 2-year-old. And 2-year-olds don't have a whole lot of navigational skills. And so it's, that was kind of interesting. Well, after my friend from Nevada, after she told me all this last night, this morning I got thinking about it, and I tried to reach out last night to see if I could get anybody to tell me anything, and I didn't. But this morning, I thought to reach out to try to collaborate this, and with another viewer/friend medium. And this will be the one, if you watched my recent video about what happened when I was in Cottonwood, this will be the lady that was sitting in the Starbucks in the Safeway with me when we were talking about stuff and we both got zapped. Well, she lives in Sedona, and she has them around her place. So I texted her this morning, and I said, hey, would you ask the folks that you have dealings with and see if they tell you anything? Now, I deliberately didn't tell her what the lady from Nevada had told me about this. I just totally kind of dropped that on her to see if she could come up with something. Well, a little bit later, she texted me back. And she said, yeah, she reached out and to see if anybody out there would be interested in telling her about this. And she had a female named Parmy. And apparently she's familiar with Parmy. But Parmy told her basically that, yes, they had found the little boy. And yes, they had taken him to the other ranch. And then when they got to the little ranch, or the other ranch, one of them had actually assumed the position of, I got somebody else texting me now, but I don't have to answer that right now. Anyway, had assumed the shape of the dog, shapeshifted into the dog to lead him back to the ranch house to make sure that he was found and he was safe. And what they didn't tell her, very conveniently, of course, is that they didn't tell her about the first part, about how the 3 juveniles were involved in the disappearance to start with. They didn't tell her about that part, but from the finding the kid on, what they told her was exactly what the folks over in Nevada, the Sasquatch folks over in Nevada, had told my friend over there. Absolutely, almost word for word. So I thought that whole thing was pretty cool. So do we know that happened? Well, we got it from 2 different sources in 2 different states. So like everything else I tell you, you're free to believe what you want to believe and what you don't want to believe. I've tried to reach out myself and try to verify it myself to get a third direction verification on that. So far, I haven't got anybody to answer me on the subject. That doesn't mean I'm going to quit trying, and I'll bring you up to date if I get anything more of it. But I'd be real interested in learning a little bit more about that. And so I know I have some viewers that are in the Seligman area, and so if you know anything more about it, reach out to me, let me know. And if you know the family that involved with this, I would sure like to talk to them. I think that would be interesting. I'd be very, very interested to know what this little kid had for shoes. Because, that country over there is pretty tough. And for somebody to walk 7 miles overnight, he had some pretty good footwear on. I'd be interested to see what his feet and his shoes looked like after this was over with. But anyway, this is kind of the story we got on it. And I figured you'd be interested in hearing about it. And hopefully I'll be able to confirm it from another direction. But 2 directions is pretty, I think, 2 unrelated directions I think is pretty good. So I'll tell you, as I always do, take care of each other and love each other and be grateful for what you got. And just another little story from the Crazy Train files. And we'll be back again with another one here pretty quick. So for right now, nothing more to do, I guess, than tell you, have a happy Easter. And until I talk to you again, peace out.